took almost 2 years of development to get a product into customers' hands because of how complex consumer electronics are, especially with very high cybersecurity and very high uptime and reliability requirements. There are shortcuts to launching consumer products much faster. I think this is an important point to reiterate.
So you went from essentially revolutionizing menswear to transforming how families sleep, specifically parents. So walk us through like the pivotal moment when you realized sleep was the next problem you needed to solve.
It was while building Mizzen+Main. It was a very pivotal and memorable time. I signed the term sheet for our investment from El Caterton in Mizzen+Main in the delivery room for my firstborn, Jack. It was 8 years ago, a little over 8 years ago, just had his birthday. So that time really stands out to me because of how kind of pivotal every day and every moment was. I did a lot of research, and the number one kind of covered baby monitor, the one that got all the press and got all the accolades, was Nanit. Nanit is a Wi-Fi camera that runs an app on your phone. And I woke up one morning, my son was, 2 or 3 months old, and he was in his own room, and I realized that the audio that's supposed to run in the background all day long, all night long, had just stopped. The app had just crashed. And I reached out to Nanit, and they basically had no productive response. Apps on phones crash all the time. That's just the nature of an app. It's not meant to be relied upon. And so I learned the hard way that apps on phones aren't baby monitors. We went out and bought an old school baby monitor. It was really that moment that was oh shit, like, how is this the best that parents have? Right? Baby registries are $4,000 to $20,000 worth of stuff across the car seats and the strollers and the clothes and the cribs and all of that. And the best that we have to offer is hacking together multiple systems of hardware to get like the basic functionality that technology has. And so that idea has stayed with me since 8 years ago. And we launched Harbor officially in 2024. And since I had this idea 8 years ago, no one has even remotely improved the product. And indeed, Nanit over the last 8 years hasn't gotten any better. Their pace of innovation and their product releases are glacial. And so it's part of why I'm pretty confident that we're going to go be able to win.
Heck yeah. I love that. So the shift from a t-shirt, not to make it...
It was a dress shirt. It was a dress shirt. Yes.
A physical like basically going from t-shirts to hardware and a service platform. Can you talk through that transition for you as like founder of very used to, you get used to the ways of the world of running a certain business, and now that is very different?
It's actually not that significant of a jump. As I share what I'm working on, I get a lot of cross-eyed people kind of look at me crazy and like, you went from dress shirts to baby monitors and sleep services and telehealth. And at the end of the day, it's a physical product that didn't exist, that should exist, and I'm selling it to, hopefully, millions of customers starting a website online. It'd be very different if I went into an LLM, we're going to go transform how patients interact with doctors via, LLM and whatever. But there are some similarities, obviously, in terms of mass product distribution, the benefits of omnichannel retail. Meta is now, the 800-pound gorilla. Google was and still is also the 800-pound gorilla. I would say the biggest difference from starting Mizzen+Main to starting Harbor is when I started Mizzen+Main, Instagram was kind of the thing. It was like early innings of Instagram. And the idea of an influencer was just, it didn't exist, right? There were some websites that curated interesting things online, but there was no influencer. And I think that there's a lot of absurdities around the world of influencers, and we can make fun of them in plenty of ways, and I certainly do. But great influencers build unbelievable trust with their audience. And that's the thing that has really been a pivotal difference in terms of how we've launched Harbor versus how I launched Mizzen+Main. I didn't really need to build trust to get guys my age to try a performance fabric dress shirt. Based on the price point and based on guys that I was our target demo, they were used to performance fabrics, and I just needed to tell them, hey, give this thing a try. And we worked with pro athletes and we did a lot of other things to gain awareness, but I didn't need to build trust. With Harbor, I am trying to tell parents, trust us with the technology to watch your child every night. We have a unique story to tell because what I'm saying is I built one company and I'm building Harbor because the leading product on the market failed our family and parents and kids deserve better. So like my story connects in a certain way, but ultimately almost all of our influencer marketing is focused on partnering with moms and moms telling the story of what is the experience of using Harbor and why do I like Harbor? Why did I not like these other devices? And look, certainly you can tell that we've paid to partner with an influencer. They're required to use the word ad and all of that. But also these moms have built audiences where the good ones aren't just going to throw their reputation away for an extra X thousands of dollars per post. And I think that is certainly the single biggest from a brand and an advertising perspective change. And then, of course, the fact that Meta is so good at advertising now is a huge change as well, right? Like I remember the evolution when Facebook went all in on mobile, it was this idea that people's, the time they spent on the platform was going to change. They're so good. And I still laugh whenever people talk about, privacy and Facebook shouldn't know. I'm like, you have no idea how much advertisers know about you in so many ways. Like the fact that you like a certain menswear brand and they show you another menswear brand, that's just helping you find new things that you love. This is not surreptitious, devious advertising that you should be concerned about. There are much greater privacy concerns than what Facebook knows about you.
For sure. Well, I mean, this kind of just segues pretty well into the next question when you're talking about Meta. On the conversation, like the topic of CAC, customer acquisition and landscape, and how that's changed dramatically since you started Mizzen+Main. Like, how are you thinking about CAC and LTV differently with Harbor, especially given the combination of hardware sales and subscription revenue?
Yeah. So we actually, we are a one-time purchase. We do not have
No
a
LTV.
subscription. Yep. Well, our LTV is the value add services that we will add over time. So we do remote night nanny sleep support. We will be layering in additional telehealth capabilities over time. So the idea for Harbor, it is a camera and a monitor that connect directly to each other without internet. I've got them here. And both devices also connect to the internet. So you get the best of both worlds. The old school reliable device that you don't need the internet for, but both devices also connect to the cloud. So you can record, you can rewind, you get all the benefits of internet connectivity. The camera also has an AI chip in it and a memory chip in it. So all of your footage is stored and processed locally on the device. We do not store or process any user's footage unless there is a technical reason why they're granting us access. And that puts us worlds apart from a cybersecurity and also an ongoing infrastructure cost. We're not storing terabytes of data of users' footage and therefore charging them for it. Over time, there are other services that we can create that lifetime value in that relationship with, but it's all about getting the product into people's home, changing their lives with the product. And then there are other things that we believe that we can
building trust first and then tapping into it and providing additional services.
Yep. And our remote night nanny capability is unlike anything that has ever existed. And in short, it's instead of $300 to $700 a night for someone to come into your house for as low as $25 a night, you can turn over the controls of your monitor to our professionally trained night nurses who will only wake you up when it's time for you to go into your child's room. And if there's a loss of connection, you're alerted that we are no longer supporting you as a family. It's 100% opt-in. We cannot see it unless you grant us access. But that is how we end up. That is an example of the value add service that we add over time. So with that, all of our marketing effort is about getting the product into customers' homes. It's about raising awareness. It is creating distinction and differentiation relative to the other products in the market. We have a very unique story to tell. Going backwards on the Mizzen+Main front, the lifetime value with Mizzen+Main is very different.
That was going to be my next question. What was that looking like?
With Mizzen+Main, for a long time, our focus has been on being first order profitable, ultimately, because we're not chasing, hey, one day we'll end up making money. And the strategies have changed over time. We were talking before we hit record about some of the insane DTC world where companies were losing 50 to 100% of their top line revenue on an annual basis because that was sort of the way that things were done at the time. We never did anything like that. It's mind blowing to think about losing that much money. But with Mizzen+Main, the focus is how do we remain first order profitable or very close to it, and then figure out what does that LTV cycle look like. And what we found There are a couple things that are probably not surprising. Anyone who visited our stores, and today we have 11 stores, visited one of our stores and bought something online was something like 3 or 4 or 5x more valuable from a lifetime value perspective than someone who just bought something online. And that comes from, people who experience the brand, they experience the store. This is why so many great DTC brands have invested in stores, because the relationship that you create with your customers is just fundamentally different. And there's also something very real about, there's a new brand every second that is advertising to you on Instagram. But if you've seen them physically in the real world, there is this sense of, okay, they're real. There's something a little bit more
Deeper
to
connection.
them than, yeah. And also just a sense of legitimacy that this is a real brand. This isn't something where I'm going to buy a new product and, it's going to fall apart, Temu or Shane style. And so the other kind of learning that we had along the way was that if someone bought their second order within, I think it was 3 or 4 months.
I was going to say 90 days.
Yeah, something like that. They tended to be a very, very sticky customer. And so certainly there's a lot of work done on how do we help people figure out what is that next product that they will really care about. And then over time, we have a lot of ancillary products that are nice round out of the assortment. And in a menswear brand, you have to have more than just your hero SKU. But again and again and again and again, we continue to see if people buy one of our performance fabric dress shirts, it's our hero SKU. It's the thing that made us who we are, and we changed an industry with it. If that's the first product that they buy, they end up being a better lifetime customer as well. So people that buy a polo or people that buy a sweater, those are nice products that we make that we're very proud of, but that tends not to be as engaged long-term of a customer as the person who ends up coming into the brand on one of those hero SKUs.
And would lend itself to buying a complementary product and greater LTV. So what I'm hearing there, though, is you guys want to be first order profitable within an environment where everyone is just pedal to the metal, growth mode at the sake of profitability. You guys weren't sacrificing that. You guys weren't leaning into the LTV side of things. How does that compare to how you're going about acquisition with Harbor now? Are you guys first order profitable, similar to Mizzen+Main? You're not banking on LTV here to save the day. What does that look like for you guys?
It took almost 2 years of development to get a product into customers' hands because of how complex consumer electronics are, especially with very high cybersecurity and very high uptime and reliability requirements. It is many, many, many millions of dollars of investment to get something that customers
A little bit different.
Very different. There are shortcuts to launching consumer products much faster. And I think this is an important point to reiterate, especially as I was learning about what it would take to launch this. There were some people that told me some numbers that turned out to be 10 to 25% of the total investment that was actually required. And that's because if you're willing to cut corners and you're willing to copycat and be loose with intellectual property and cybersecurity, you can go get somebody to spin you up a product real quick from China. And there are very serious quality requirements that are problems there. But then there's also very serious cybersecurity. Like if you have your product that is just off the shelf from China, the opportunity or the reality that there is not a backdoor into your data, it's almost zero. It's just to put differently, like there's basically not a electronics product that's made in China with one of these fast and loose ODMs that there isn't a backdoor. And so we made our camera and our monitor outside of China with non-Chinese silicon. And we control the process of what the firmware is, and we control all the update protocols, and we've got people on the lines there. And so when it comes to getting this product made, we had to do it right, and it was a huge investment to get any products into customers' hands.
You had to do it right away. Had to do it right away versus getting some sales and then going to raise some capital after you sold some t-shirts.
Yeah, it takes a lot to get one of these products in consumers' hands, from the development, from the intellectual property, from building the production lines, because all the production lines, you have to pay for all the CapEx, and you have to pay for all the tooling, you have to pay for all the engineering time, and then you have to pay for all the inventory. And so all that said, a huge investment has gone to getting this product into customers' hands. And then from how do we think about, comparable, first order profitable, all of that. Right now, we have raised money to build a product, but we haven't raised the, frothy ZERT money that everyone else had raised for all the other consumer products. So we're not spending a ton of money on advertising. And as of right now, we are first order profitable because we know that we will be able to create additional lifetime. Thank you. We know that we will be able to create additional lifetime value over time, but it's not in the business model to say in 90 or 100 or 180 days, we're going to get that next hit of cash. And so just fundamentally, we can't pursue that strategy that is what built a lot of the other DTC mania hype brands that candidly, we see so many of them struggle. They might achieve some lofty total number, but very few of them have ever done it successfully because they just never had the unit economics and they never had the discipline to build the organization in a way that was long-term sustainable.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's obvious that, we've already kind of alluded to it a little bit here. You've raised capital for both Mizzen+Main as well as for Harbor, different times for different reasons, and it looked differently. When you went about doing that, what are the fundamental differences in how investors evaluate these business models when they look to invest in you? I think our audience would be really interested in it to get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, so certainly one major distinction is I started Mizzen+Main 12, 13 years ago, and it was a very different world at the time. When I talk about the process of starting Mizzen+Main and why I did, one of the things that contributed to it was the early innings of what felt like entrepreneur mania. Instagram, I don't know what year they were acquired for $1 billion, but that was an eye-opening thing to experience as a young post-grad. I graduated in 2008. I spent a couple of years working in the real world and then decided that this idea for a performance fabric dress shirt was something that I couldn't not pursue. I had to try to make it. And when I started, I didn't try to raise any money, partly because I had no idea what I was doing and partly because who would just give me money to go try this crazy thing? I had literally no credentials or reason for anyone to invest in me. And so when I started, I just put what little money I had saved up into, figuring out how to make the product and some of the patterns and the tech packs and making the first run of shirts, and then going out and trying to sell some product. It was about a year into that process where I just knew I need more money to buy more shirts. And, I'm going to trade shows and a trade show is 10 grand. And I didn't need millions of dollars. I just needed some more money. And at that point in time, the people that invested in me were a couple of my former colleagues from my first job that I had stayed in touch with. And they had seen what I was doing on Facebook and thought it was pretty cool. And my family put in a little bit of money, and one or two guys that I knew from kind of business neighborhood-ish groups that gave me somewhere between 5 and 20 grand. And all in, my first raise ended up being about $220,000. And that took me through the next year. And, at that point in time, now we're spending a couple $1,000s a month on Facebook, because that was the early innings of those advertising dollars. Trying a little bit of this, a little bit of that, slightly nicer presence at the trade show. And I use that example in those very early innings because it was not put together a deck and go try and raise $3 million. And it was all about, here's what I've done so far, and here's what I'm going to keep doing. It wasn't some complex model. It was kind of go get anyone who would give me a little bit of money.
And showing proof of concept.
Yeah. And I remember one of the guys that I had worked with previously, I pitched him, I think twice. And he asked me to. I didn't continue to harass him. I'm generally very respectful about not following up with people who clearly don't want me to. But both times he was like, you just don't really have something for me to invest in yet. And then, I don't know, it was probably after I'd raised $1 million and we were starting to, really crank. And he said, how you doing? We caught up on the phone, and I said something about, at the time we were doing like 8 to 10 grand a day in sales or something along those lines. And he's like, oh shit, that's something I could have invested in. I'm like, well, you missed the boat. Like you got to take that risk a little bit earlier than this is clearly some sort of automatic thing for you to invest in. So fun memories from those days. With Harbor, I knew that in order to launch something like this, the first thing I had to do was go find a co-founder. And I found an unbelievable technical co-founder. He's our chief product officer. He was an electrical engineer, flew attack helicopters for the Army for 8 years, got an MBA, became a chief development officer at an IoT firm, and helped sell that. And then we ended up connecting through a friend. He knows how to build software for hardware connected devices in large deployments with high uptime and cybersecurity requirements. It's like the perfect match. The only way he could have had a more perfect background was if he had built consumer cameras before. And so we teamed up in summer of 22 and basically put together a roadmap to say, for a pre-seed investment, what are the things that have to be achieved? And obviously we need to have visibility into prototypes. We've got to build some of the software. We have to get some, MVP, low fidelity proof of concept. We have to identify the manufacturer. And so we put together, the roadmap and said, over this period of time, this is how much capital we need to raise. Here's what our salaries or kind of contractor expenses, because we didn't hire anybody immediately, but here are the contractors that we would need. And it was all about, here's what we're going to do over the next year to enable us to go raise a seed round. Here are all the proof points we're going to hit, and here's when we're going to hit them. Largely, we were exactly correct. There were other things post-seed round that turned out to be much more difficult, but it was like, this is what it's going to take to get to the seed round. And we did it, and that enabled us to go raise a seed round. The seed round was much more difficult, largely because the venture market had almost completely frozen if you weren't doing pure play AI. And then the consumer market and then the hardware market had completely evaporated. If you wanted to do consumer and you wanted to do something physical like that you could touch with atoms, especially with electronics, everyone had just stopped writing checks altogether. So our seed round ultimately took over a year to raise. And it ended up being in chunks and pieces. And we have a couple different firms and a couple great angel investors that came in, but it took a long time to do that. Because again, starting electronics is so expensive. If you do it right, you have an unbelievable moat because no one else is doing it, but people don't really want to take that big upfront risk, especially given how much the venture, consumer, and hardware markets have frozen. But we've been able to get it going, and we officially started shipping product in September of 24. We've shipped thousands of devices. We now have omni-channel distribution. Things are going really well. Just, nearly killed us getting to this point in time.
Yeah, so it seems like a massive feat. I'm just curious. This is kind of off the cuff question here. I mean, obviously, Mizzen+Main, right? You had a guy telling you, I'm just not ready yet. Like a little bit more proof of concept, see the sales coming in. Obviously, you don't have the opportunity to do that with Harbor here and getting a pre-seed round. Do you feel like they were investing in you or?
Exclusively. Yeah, exclusively.
That's what it sounds like.
And I don't say that with a lack of humility. I appreciate the reality. It was, I have built one consumer brand and I understand what it takes to build a physical product, international supply chain, omni-channel distribution, secure celebrity endorsements, raise the capital, go through transactions. And the interesting thing about timing here, I started raising that pre-seed in 22. When I started down the road of building Harbor, a lot of very smart people I spoke to in venture and startup world, you're like, shit, with your background, you'll be able to raise $5 million in a pre-seed with a PowerPoint. I was like, oh, well, like I hadn't raised venture. I'd raised kind of angel and then eventually private equity. I was like, all right. And so I got my act together. I found a co-founder. I went through the whole process. And by the time I was ready to start those fundraising conversations, the venture world had hit an absolute wall in the summer of 22, like just hard stop, evaporated. And so when I started talking to people, everyone was basically like, you're insane. Why would anyone give you any money? You're doing consumer, you're pre-product, pre-prototype, pre-launch, like absolutely not. Like, it's funny because all of you 6 months ago had a very different story. And that's just the nature of startups and investing. But the early investors were all people that I knew very well for many, many years and said, we believe in what you are going to try to go do. It may or may not work. It's venture. But we believe in what you're going to go do. And now you've got to go prove it. And then in the seed round, I had some people that I didn't know, but still were largely betting on, you've done this once before. We think you can repeat some version of the playbook. And in some aspects, it's been much easier because anyone will take my phone call now. Almost anyone will take my phone call. But then you explain to them what you want to do and how expensive it is to build it. And they're like, ooh, not that. Like,
Right.
I definitely don't want to do that. And I've joked with many and other podcasts that I've done, like every pre-seed and seed stage venture capital firm says, we want to partner with visionary entrepreneurs who want to change the way the world operates and create something that's never, like no one ever thought was possible before. And you're like, hey, I have a track record. And they're like, ooh, not like that though. Like, not like that. And that's just, again, the nature of venture. And there's plenty of jokes you can make about VCs. And what I have really appreciated are the ones who very quickly say, I just don't feel comfortable making that type of bet right now. I look forward to you proving me wrong. And if there's anything I can do along the way, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to make any intros. Those very quick and respectful no's, I have so much respect for those people. And they give venture a great name because they do write big checks and they're very respectful with people's time. It's the ones that drag you on for weeks at a time. They don't really give you a no. They sort of drag out the ghosting answer. That was the hardest aspect of going down the road of raising venture this time.
I feel like you're really uniquely positioned with Harbor at that point because, I mean, are all the founders of the companies that are competitors for you have a similar story as you? And so I just feel like it's very hard to start a new business within that space. It seems impossible to bootstrap this.
Correct.
And so I feel as though you're uniquely positioned unless all the founders in your space are just well-established entrepreneurs that had a big exit. And, so yeah, what does that look like?
So my view of the space as it stands today is I think that we have an incredibly unique opportunity to dominate this market very quickly by delivering just a substantially better product and form factor that no one else is doing. And it's a market that no one really wants to come into. The market is dominated by two companies, Nanit, which I started Harbor because Nanit failed us.
They're the reason for the season.
Yep. And then Owlet went public via a SPAC years ago. So all their financials are public. They've constantly been in trouble with making medical claims they haven't been able to make. They've got just a very bad product reputation. I don't really worry about Owlet. If they're around in the next few years, I will be surprised given how rough of a go they've had. And then there's just this smattering of commoditized junk from China, whether they're Wi-Fi cameras with apps on your phone or just this very small, junky plastic, it's junk from China that doesn't really work that well. It isn't that reliable. People don't recommend the product. So I do think we have a really unique opportunity, especially because our message is very different than everybody else. Our form factor is completely unique. And then the way that we think that we will create lifetime value is not value extractive. It is value accretive to the families. Like if we create value, then they will tell their friends, you should use this too. And ultimately, one of the drivers of our success with Mizzen was word of mouth. We couldn't spend that much money relative to all the other clothing brands. So we had to create a product that people loved. And they did, and they told their friends about it. And with Harbor, I think about my experience when we discovered we were having a child. Every parent I knew immediately said, you got to get this stroller, you got to get this car seat. And like half the parents told us about this thing, Baby Brezza, which is like Keurig for formula. You press a button and it's the right water temperature and it's the right mix. And at 2 a.m., it's the greatest thing ever as a parent who's trying to bottle feed a child. No one recommended a baby monitor to me. No one said, this is amazing. I did research and I was reading articles about Nanit's innovation. So I thought, oh, that's cool. I like innovation. That's great. I want to try it. But people don't love Nanit. People don't love their baby monitors. And I think that we have an opportunity to create a product that people love, and that word of mouth in a very concentrated time in people's lives will be like jet fuel. And what we've seen now is our growth is accelerating. Now that we've got thousands of products out there, more people are going to tell their friends about that product. And then our remote night nanny is so fundamentally different than anything anyone ever thought possible. We're having parents tell us things like, you've given me hope to have another child. I haven't slept this well since my first trimester. because of your night nanny, because
That's
of your service, I got dressed and took my kid out of the house for the first time since I brought them home. And so that word of mouth, that engine is unlike anything that anyone else is doing. And so now it's just about getting it out there and pushing hard enough and fast enough while not being able to blow millions of dollars in a way that gets us to that next level.
Well, what are the main channels that are driving that growth right now? You mentioned, Meta, you mentioned mommy bloggers and influencers that are moms. Are there any channels that are surprising in the terms of effectiveness outside of, Meta as a champion and then influencers and moms that you had already mentioned?
I would say nothing is surprising yet because we're still early innings. So nothing has been oh my gosh. Influencers and Meta, we're doing a lot of whitelisting and standard kind of Meta influencer work. We have a really big affiliate program where it's rev share for influencers promoting our product. We created you do not have to be an influencer program, which is, if you're an influencer, you have an audience and you can do share a sale and get a rev share. You have an audience and therefore you can make money. We created an affiliate program where you don't have to have a social media audience at all. You could be a youth group leader. You could be a mom's Bible study leader. You can be a realtor and you can get a link and you can earn $100 for every sale of a harbor system. We've had hundreds of people sign up for that. We've driven some early revenue. We literally just started that program. I would say actually maybe a surprise to answer that question, although I'm not surprised. We created a program in the middle of December. We call it Great Baby Monitor Swap, where if you're a new parent, you're going to hopefully put Harbor on your registry, but you may not buy that product or have someone buy it for you for 6 months. You could say, hey, I want to buy Harbor, but your kid's not due until the summer. And so we've won you as a customer. It's just going to take a long time. So what we did was for parents who maybe got their monitor on their registry in the last year or two, and they're not sure that they want to buy a new one because they have one, even if they don't love it, we created a swap program. And so we will give you up to $200 off Harbor when you send in your monitor. We'll wipe it, sanitize it, and upsell it through a third-party website for people who want to buy secondhand gear. And we had converted hundreds of families over the course of the last 6-8 weeks. And the feedback's been awesome. A lot of people are like, look, I just got my baby monitor, 6 months ago. It's outside the return window and I wasn't ready to buy a whole new one. But this has brought many people into the fold. And we think that's the right investment from a flywheel perspective. And, I'd rather give a family $100 than Meta. And that's basically what we're doing.
It's only going to build greater trust too and lend itself to far more LTV with the service
Absolutely.
side of the business.
And they're more likely to tell people about their experience too, because it's a very memorable thing. Otherwise, we just started shipping on Amazon at the end of January. We should be Prime eligible sometime in the middle of February. That's kind of a process. We got on Babylist, which is the #1 baby registry site. Took us a while to get into their system, but mid-February, we just went live on Babylist. And then we've got a couple other kind of early innings mom and pop boutique groups that we're starting to work with, and we're talking with some big box retailers, which wouldn't hit until next year.
Congrats on the Babylist. One of our clients is currently potentially getting bought out by them right now. But that's great. That's a huge one. Great marketplace.
They've built a really great business.
Yeah.
Kevin, what are you most excited about the rest of 25? Like one thing. Give us one thing that you're most excited about.
The broader sense of optimism that has returned in the country. And so, the paralysis that I saw and felt in the broader consumer sentiment and M&A market and everything over the last 18, 24 months, it's been, even though I'm an entrepreneur who believes in like the art of the possible and building the future and going, it's been hard not to feel that cloud that is just kind of hanging around. My friends who work in M&A, my friends who work in real estate, everyone's just sort of been holding their breath for what feels like almost 2 years. And there's going to be no shortage of challenges, new problems, all sorts of things that will happen. But there is a sense of optimism and opportunity. I'm very excited for a new DOJ and FTC from the broader M&A market, right? Like Lena Khan blocked Amazon from buying iRobot, which was maybe one of the dumbest antitrust monopoly things ever. There are so many robot vacuums, and somehow it was deemed that Amazon was going to corner the market on robot vacuums. And the knock-on effect of something like that is real, because you have all these people who now their stock is not necessarily worthless, but no one else is buying iRobot, and the value of that company tanked. It freezes a lot of other M&A decisions that people might make, because you have a general, antagonistic approach to the idea of M&A and economic growth and opportunity. So when you think about things like a new approach to the FTC and the DOJ and even the FCC, permitting reform, NEPA, we're recording this on the 18th. It looks like some pretty significant permitting reform is going to happen. That I just don't think we have any idea of the amount of opportunity that is coming. And I think that will have knock-on effects in so many aspects of the economy and consumer sentiment and opportunity that I'm just really excited about the year ahead.
What would be your advice for someone maybe that's already had a venture that's jumping into their next one?
Cool. So many things.
Just pick one. I know you got a lot of wisdom.
Don't underestimate that even if you've done it once before, how much longer and more expensive everything is. I think as entrepreneurs, we can believe in our own capability to sort of make the world do what we want it to. And you have to suspend disbelief to start a company. But if you're doing it again, just temper the, I can get that done in 6 months. It's probably not 6 months. That would be the shortest answer to that question.
Well, Kevin, appreciate you sharing all your wisdom today and your story.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, man.
If Taylor's an expecting new dad, but also for those that are looking for baby monitors, harbor.co is the website. And then if you wanted to reach out to you, Kevin, where would be best to find you?
Yeah, X is the best. It's at Kevin S. Lavelle. And I think I have the same name on Instagram. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. I try and share some of the journey with a little bit of a building in public approach, sharing some of the things happening behind the scenes. But I would say, our mission at Harbor is happier parents and healthier families, one restful night at a time. And so even if you don't need a baby monitor, you already have one, maybe you live in a studio apartment and there's nothing to monitor because they're right next to you. We have tons of free resources at harbor.co, sleep guides, all sorts of things that we think can help parents. We've got a great Harbor Council with pediatricians and sleep experts and OB-GYNs that write on our blog just to share guidance and information. So you don't have to be a customer for us to be able to be helpful. We would love to help every parent in any way that we can. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I do my best to respond. I get, 10 random cold X DMs a day to help me build free landing pages. I generally do not respond to those. But otherwise, if I can be helpful, I'd be happy to do so.
All right. One of those might be from us. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
I don't think so.
Kevin, thanks for the time.
Appreciate you, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.